Good morning, everyone. Merry Christmas. In honor of Christmas, I thought I would speak today on the topic, Blessed are the pure in heart. This, of course, is the first half of one of the most important teachings that we find in the Christian Bible. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. This is from a section that's actually Matthew 5:8. This is from a section of the Sermon on the Mount, which is called the Beatitudes. And we might say that this is the most important teaching that we find not only in Christian Bible, but perhaps in all of the teachings that we have in all the different spiritual traditions of the world. We find so much emphasis on this idea of purity of heart and this other idea of some direct realization of God. What that means, we all have to try to struggle and try to figure out. But anyhow, we have this statement by Sri Ramakrishna, the ultimate goal of life is God realization, some type of vision of God, some experience of God. So I thought this morning that I would speak about this. We heard a little bit last night about all of the connections that our Vedanta tradition has with Christ and with Christianity. Many of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna went to Christian missionary schools. And the relationship that they had was something curious, I might say, because there wasn't always this tremendous respect for the missionary activity and for the behavior of the missionaries there. Many of them looked down upon the Hindus as heathens and everything. But at the same time, a tremendous love and respect for the figure of Christ himself. I remember hearing somewhere, I don't remember where I heard it from or who said it, but it may have been one of our Swamis when he was in school. Because the reason why so many of our monks and so many educated young people went to missionary schools, especially at that time, was because of English. These were the real English medium schools, and they needed to know English to be able to get some type of good job. So anyhow, he was saying that after hearing about Christ, he developed some tremendous respect and devotion for Christ and kept a picture of Christ on his shrine in his room. And one of his teachers saw the picture there and thought, oh, you must want to become Christian. So the teacher approached and said, would you like to convert to Christianity? And the student couldn't understand why the teacher thought that having a picture of Christ meant he wanted to become Christian. And the teacher couldn't understand why he would have a picture of Christ if he didn't want to become Christian. So just a different way of looking at things. For this Hindu boy, it was perfectly fine that another holy person, another person to be honored and revered. And from the Christian point of view, that accepting Christ meant you wanted to become Christian. So just a different way of looking at things. But the point is that whether they respected the activities of the Christian missionaries or not, that many of these young men, especially Swamiji, will see, developed a tremendous reverence for the teaching and life of Christ, so that Christ really has entered into the pantheon of avatars for many in India. We know, of course, about Sri Ramakrishna's experience of Christ and how many times he referred to him. We heard last night of that tremendous vision that he had also. And these young boys, they would hear Sri Ramakrishna talking about Christ also as an avatar. So this is something that really, I don't know how early it was, but once the British came to India and people discovered the wonderful life of Christ, that I was held in great reverence throughout the country, even today, of course. When Swamiji traveled throughout India as an itinerant monk, they say that he carried two books with him. One was the Gita, and the other, Imitation of Christ. And Swamiji was so taken with this book, Imitation of Christ, that he, I don't know if he completed it, but started a Bengali translation. And he at least wrote an introduction to it, and we find in that introduction the imitation of Christ is a cherished treasure of the Christian world. This great book was written by a Roman Catholic monk. Written, perhaps, is not the proper word. This is Swamiji's introduction. It would be more appropriate to say that each letter of the book is marked deep with the heart's blood of the great soul who had renounced all for his love of Christ. And then, of course, when Swamiji was in the West, he spoke about Christ very often. This was natural because almost exclusively the Christian audience that he was speaking to. And he said at one time, "Had I lived in Palestine in the days of Jesus of Nazareth, I would have washed his feet not with my tears, but with my heart's blood." So this was a great reverence that Swamiji had. This one statement that we're discussing, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God," is something that Swamiji also referred to. In one of his talks, he gave some beautiful lectures on Christ also. He said, "This sentence alone, 'Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God,' this sentence alone would save mankind if all books and prophets were lost. This purity of heart will bring the vision of God. It is the theme of the whole music of this universe. In purity is no bondage. Remove the veils of ignorance by purity, then we manifest ourselves as we really are, and know that we were never in bondage." This Swamiji brings in his Vedantic point of view. "The seeing of many is the great sin of the entire world. See all as self and love all. Let all idea of separateness go." So we have this wonderful teaching. It sounds like it's a very simple teaching, and we should all understand it and know how to follow it. But it's one of these things that's very deceivingly simple. That what do we mean by purity of heart? And even more difficult, what do we mean by seeing God? We talk about this very glibly all of the time. The goal of life is to see God. The God vision, God realization, knowledge of Brahman and everything. But if we ask ourselves, what does it mean? We're striving to realize something, and if we want to ask ourselves, what does it mean? Most of us will find that we don't have a very clear conception of what it means. First of all, seeing. Is there anything to do with it, actual visual seeing? And what is our conception of God, that God can be seen? So these are things that really need to be deeply thought about if we want to be able to put this teaching into practice. And purity of heart. What do we mean exactly? Purity of mind, purity of heart, are these two different things? What is a pure heart? So these are all questions, especially today, on Christmas Day, I think is a good time for us to try to discuss these things a little bit. So seeing God. This was that one question that young Narendra was just whole mind and soul were wrapped up with this question, how to see God. And we hear that he would approach some of these big religious leaders of the day, even Rabindranath Tagore, and he would ask them, "Sir, have you seen God?" And most of them were honest people, and they would be a little embarrassed. What could they say? I think Rabindranath said to him, "You have the look of a yogi. You strive for that." But no one could say anything until he went to Sri Ramakrishna. And that was the first time that he said, the first time that I'd met someone who said, "Yes, I've seen God. I see God more clearly than I see you, and you can also see God and talk to God." So then he had met the man of his heart. When Swamiji heard Sri Ramakrishna say all of that. And this was not a conviction that Sri Ramakrishna had based on any belief or anything. It was his direct experience. He had had that vision or realization of God with form, without form, all different varieties, following all different traditions. And for him, it was something that was unquestionable. The truth of that assertion was more clear to him than anything else that we could say. That to say that I see God more clearly than I see anything else, and to say it with such conviction, we know that that experience had to have been something earth-shaking, we can say. If we had that experience, whole life would be changed in a flash to have that type of experience. So this is a point, Sri Ramakrishna could say that, but we wonder, at least I wonder, what does it really mean to see God? We assume, of course, that it doesn't mean visually with these eyes, although there is a way of understanding it. But generally, we take the seeing of God to be somehow some type of metaphor, that some experience, some direct realization. We have to use metaphors because we don't know how to explain things otherwise. To have this experience, Sri Ramakrishna used to talk about seeing God not with these ordinary eyes. Sometimes he would talk about having a love body, seeing God with love eyes, and not through these physical senses. So we come to understand that there's mystical language, that Sri Ramakrishna, I always think of Sri Ramakrishna as a mystic. Now, some people don't like this term. Things are too mysterious. It doesn't mean mysterious. The mystic in the sense that he could raise his mind to a different level where he would have this direct experience and could commune with God and hear the voice of the Divine Mother. And not some unexplainable, mysterious thing, but his level of mind was different. The nature of his mind was different. He had access, he had a channel that he could tune into that we can't tune into. So for him, this was a direct experience. Now, this idea of seeing God, for the strict Vedantists, the Advaitin, we can say, seeing God is a little bit of a tricky type of statement, because ultimate expression, ultimate definition of the divine is the seer and not the seen. This is the Brahman is the Atman, Brahman is the witness, Brahman is awareness, and is one of the axiomatic truths of Vedanta, that the seer can never be seen, the subject can never be turned into an object, that every time we say that we see the self, that we're objectifying that, and the real self is the one that's doing the seeing. So from that point of view, we understand that even Brahmajnana, to know Brahman, Brahman is the knower, Brahman cannot be the object of knowledge, that this is just the manner of speech that we use. Even the great Vedantic statement that the knower Brahman becomes Brahman, this is also not very accurate from a Vedantic point of view. That the knower Brahman, Brahman is the knower, and becoming Brahman, we're already Brahman. But we're helpless. We have to use words. We know deep down what it means. We attain that higher state of knowledge. We realize we were always that. We realize our oneness that way. But all of these explanations, especially the very strict Vedantic point of view that the knower can never be known, all of this takes a backseat to the experience of the mystics, because they have some direct experience. That means that God is both the experiencer and the experience somehow. And it defies our logic and our easy explanations, but we can't deny it because it's a life-changing experience. When one has that experience, all doubt is removed, whole character is transformed, that the whole purpose of life the goal of life is achieved. And it's something that is undoubtable, unquestionable for somebody who has that. And it can come in so many different ways, so many different types of experiences. This is one of the great things that we learn from the life of Sri Ramakrishna. Otherwise, we can point to each and every different saint, followed a different path, and had a different type of experience. In the life of Sri Ramakrishna, he did all of them himself. He followed the different paths and experienced God in different ways, in different forms, and formless, infinite, absolute reality, and merged and became one with that, and melded into this ocean, and then came back again. He did everything. And these are all examples of seeing God, however whether we like that term or don't like that term, that this is something that is unquestionable in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. And if we believe him, it's something that we can all achieve, and that everyone will achieve, and we have to achieve. Whether in this lifetime or not, we can't say, but ultimately, when we say that this is the Jivana Uddesho, this is the goal of life, it means that life this will keep going on. It can only culminate in this ultimate experience. That means that the water of the river, the end that it reaches has to be the ocean. There's no question about that. We can say there are other intermediate goals and everything, but the final goal will have to be the ocean itself. So this is that experience that defies easy explanation and easy logic. And as I say, there's so many different types. It can be visions, it can be samadhi. It can be absolutely lost in that reality, sense of I is all gone. And these are so different, these experiences, we wonder what is the common ground. But this common ground is that life is changed forever. There's this absolute transformation that takes place that makes it impossible for the one who has experienced it to question it. We read in the Upanishads that all the karma becomes burnt, all the knots of the heart are undone, and whatever doubts we had are completely removed when one has that ultimate experience. So this is one of those truths that we can accept without knowing exactly what it means, what it will be like. In fact, impossible to know what it will be like. But there are many things like that. We have tremendous faith, and a lot of things that we have a very vague conception of until we experience them. I remember before I went to India on my first trip, I had so many ideas in my mind what it'll be like. And then when I finally got there, I said, so this is what it's like. So something like that. We try to form some conception of what this experience will be like, and we're so fortunate that we have so many descriptions from Sri Ramakrishna that help us to have some conception of what this experience of God is like. We wonder sometimes why Thakur always talking about his experiences, that we're always told, don't talk about your spiritual experiences, keep them to yourself. He did it for our sake. Otherwise, we would have no idea what these things are like. He had to do it. He was born to do it. So we find that there are souls who have had this experience. They live in the world as free souls, Jivan Muktas, this Atmarama state, that they're filled with joy, that they're completely dependent on the Divine Mother, whatever their spiritual attitude is. And these are the great souls that are the standard bearers for us. We read the Holy Mother saying that, especially when she was in Dakshineshwar, but she felt as if there were a jar of bliss, always filled to the brim within her heart. So this feeling of joy, this feeling of fulfillment, of perfection, that will remain once we have this type of experience. Now, it may be that the seeing of God will be a state where we actually see God in everywhere and in everything. This was Sri Ramakrishna's other type of experience, that wherever he looked, either he would say he saw everything as Chinmay, everything is manifestation of that divine consciousness, or he would see God dwelling within all beings. So many times he would make these statements, especially when he was in Kashipur, that he was really in that mood where everybody he saw was God himself. The one image that I especially like, the Latu was sitting there like this, with his chin on his hand. And Sri Ramakrishna said, you see Latu sitting there with the chin in his hand? I see Rama himself. Rama alone is sitting here with the chin in his hand. So he was in that state. He said, I see Rama within every man and Sita within every woman. He saw the divine dwelling within everyone and everything composed of consciousness, Chinmay. So this is one way we can understand seeing, if we want to go back to that analogy, that he saw the divine everywhere, or a manifestation of the divine. If we want to be strict and say divinity means the seer, he said everything is a manifestation of the divine. So this is also that vijnana state where everything is soaked in divinity, like the rasagola is soaked in syrup. That Thakur lived in that world. He saw everything that way. The other experience that he would have is everything would disappear into that void of oneness, and he would go into that state of samadhi, where there's no one to see God in that state. There's no seer, there's no seen, there's only oneness in that state. These are all different ways of experiencing the divine that we see in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. And aside from Sri Ramakrishna, we look at the direct disciples, they all had this realization in their own particular way. So it's also a question of the personality of the individual. We were talking the other day about Swami Premananda, a very interesting case, that we take him to be the embodiment of devotion, such a loving soul and everything. And yet, when he was in the presence of Sri Ramakrishna, when he was still as Baburam, and he saw everyone else singing and dancing and going to ecstasy and having visions and everything, he said to Sri Ramakrishna, why am I not having these also? So Thakur said, let me talk to Mother. And later he came back and said, Mother said that you won't have visions, that you'll have knowledge. So we can't even predict, if we ever achieve that higher state of realization, exactly what form it will come in. For Sri Ramakrishna, sometimes he had this vision in ecstasy, in bhava. So he would lose all consciousness of the outer world, have all sorts of experience of gods and goddesses and different things. Other times with eyes wide open. He talks about his first vision of Sita, and he says, this was the first time that I had that type of vision. That means that he saw, it was near the Panchavati, and he saw the trees and the ground and the sky and the leaf, everything he saw, and he sees this figure of a woman, very, very majestic looking, walk towards him, and he sees a monkey jump down from the tree and roll around, and then he realizes, this is the vision of Sita. So with eyes open, with eyes closed, both ways, that Sri Ramakrishna could have this type of this experience. Later, he really, after he broke his arm, he had that experience that he said, it was as if Mother were telling me, now see God in everyone. This is not a Leela, this will be the highest type of thing. Don't let the mind wander off and go into ecstasy. Try to see God dwelling within all beings. And he came to that conclusion that this was the highest type. He said, as Vaishnav Charan used to say it, now I know it's true. So that's why, towards the end of his life, that he had that experience, seeing God dwelling within everyone. There's a very nice quote from Swami Ashokananda, from his Meditation, Ecstasy, and Illumination. If you attain to that truth, God realization, you will find that all forms have become forms of God. Or sometimes forms just vanish away. All that remains is infinite divine substance. Or sometimes, if you are so inclined, you will find all these infinite forms have blended into one divine form. So, all different ways of understanding this. The one thing that we should try to do is develop some conviction that there's a truth, a living truth behind this idea of experience. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. It means something to see God, not the way we see ordinary things, but we have to have that conviction that this is the highest goal that we can attain in this lifetime, whether we understand exactly how it works or not. Now I want to get back to the first part of this purity of heart. What do we mean by it? How is it the catalyst? Why is this purity of heart so important for us to have this highest type of realization? When we read the scriptures, yoga scriptures especially, that we find great emphasis on purity of mind. Now, the purity of mind really means the mind becomes quiet and still. And just to let everyone know, our musicians are coming. We have a very nice program after this that we'll hear from them. Can we come? Okay, yeah, we can give them some place to sit. So this is couched mostly in the language of stilling the vrittis of the mind, making the mind perfectly still. So the pure mind in the yoga system will be the quiet mind, the still mind, and this will take, if it takes any vritti at all, it'll take the shape of Brahman itself. This is that idea that this pure mind and pure buddhi and pure atman are one and the same, that we merge the mind into the intellect, we merge the intellect into the ultimate reality itself. So that this pure, perfect clarity of mind is the purity of mind. It's like water, that the surface is perfectly calm and the water is perfectly clear. What we do with all these disturbing thoughts is we scrape up the bottom and all of the mud and everything comes up and muddies the water. And the surface is also broken. So any reflection that we see in it, the reflection will be distorted and it'll be muddied. So this purity of heart is how in yoga we understand that this water becomes perfectly translucent and also a perfect reflector of the self. But this purity of heart has a slightly different meaning and is essential for this purity of mind. If we want to think about making the mind still and calm, we have to understand that the reason it doesn't happen is because of the nature of the impure heart, we can say. This impure heart, it sounds very harsh. None of us have an impure heart, but it means the heart that has these desires and passions and emotions and ego and selfishness, and others really rajasic and tamasic qualities. This is really what we mean by that. So this purity of heart means trying to rid the heart of the different passions, selfishness, deceit, and these are the things that are really the obstacles. The obstacles to higher realization are not our inability to intellectually understand what does it mean the Atman and Brahman are one. These intellectual things are very much secondary. There's a great mistake to think that, if only I were smarter, if only I studied the scriptures more, if I only understood what it means, this Atman and Brahman are one and the same, what is this distinction between the knower and the knower, all these, that's not the problem. The problem is the heart. If we can purify that heart, the truth will dawn on its own. So the problem is that this mind and everything is a slave to the passions, that we have this tamas and rajas, and that's what prevents the mind from becoming calm. It's not that I just don't have enough power of concentration. Impossible to control this mind when it's filled with all of these enemies, what they call these shadripu. These are the different passions and things. So we have to look at it from that point of view. When we read in Gita very clearly, Sri Krishna tells us very clearly what the problem is. When Arjuna complains that why is my mind so restless, he says your mind is restless because, one, you haven't learned how to control it. Number one, abhyasa yoga, that you have to practice in everything. But he says that's half of the problem. The other problem is that the mind is filled with these passions and everything. So vairagya, we have to free the mind from this control that the passions have over the mind. Anger and come to us in the form of vasanas, of desires, and they take control over our minds. Because of these, we don't control the mind controls us. And that type of mind will never become perfectly still. So there's tremendously subtle but important connection between what we call purity of heart and purity of mind. We want the mind to become still, we have to purify the heart. And then automatically it can come. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. It's almost inevitable if we do our spiritual practice with that type of pure heart. The other thing is that even if we have some glimpse, some higher experience of truth, if the mind and heart are filled with desires, we won't be able to hold it. So Sri Ramakrishna gives another interesting example. In the village, sometimes these boys would catch a mongoose, and they would have a little area with little bricks and things, and the mongoose could climb up. They would tie a brick to the tail of the mongoose, and the mongoose would try to get up and escape, and as soon as it got a little higher, the brick would pull it back down again, so the mongoose couldn't get out. So he said this brick tied to the tail is desire. That even if we have some type of experience, we won't hold it. If we still have these worldly desires, that they'll pull the mind back down. So what are these impurities? We talk about this pure heart. What are these impurities? We have a list, the Shadripo, this 6 things. Kama, desire or lust. Krodha, anger. Lobha, greed. Mada, intoxication, some not literal intoxication. Mana, pride. And vimatsara or matsarya, envy. Now, we can expand this or change it around. This is nothing absolute about this list, but we get a good picture of the different types of passions that we have to deal with. Kama is considered the main obstacle. Lust or desire in general, lust in particular, this is considered the root. This is the branch of the trunk of the tree, and all the others kind of branch out from that. This, if we think of lust, this is a lifelong thing. This is not something that anybody can expect to just get rid of it like that. Thakur's disciples, they were lucky. Thakur, he said, oh, you suffer from lust. And then he would put his hand and touch him or say, repeat this, and it would be gone. It won't happen. There's a very interesting statement that we read in Bengali. Pure deho ore chai, tobe sadhud gun gai. So someone is asking, when we want to praise the sadhu, look at this sadhu, how wonderful he is, that there's no hint of lust within him, perfectly free from lust. So the person says, okay, when is it safe to praise a sadhu for being free from lust? When the body is burned and the ashes are flying up into the sky, then you can start singing the praises of the sadhu. And before that, one never knows when this will pop up again. So this lust, of course, is considered something very difficult. This is for sadhus more. The householder has a different way of understanding these things. But to me, the karma is not the worst of these things. It may be the root of everything, but I think that there are darker emotions and passions, especially anger and hatred. These things are really destructive. And these are things we have to work out more. I always remember we studied one time the instructions that Prajapati gave to his 3 sets of sons. You remember? The devas, manushas, so the gods and the humans and the asuras and the demons. And the instruction that he gave was the same, da, 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 the sound of the thunder. And the instruction was understood in different ways. The gods understood it as meaning that they should be free from, they should have self-control, free from kama, from lust, or free from desire. So this was the problem with the gods. The humans, what was it for the humans? Greed. And the demons, for the demons it was anger and hatred, krodha. So they'll be the really dark ones and the destructive ones. If we look at Sri Ramakrishna's story of the 3 thieves, you remember that story? that they caught hold of this man, and they had him carry all their bundles, and they stole all his money and everything, and then they were about to leave. They went in the middle of the forest, and one of them said, what do? We got to get rid of him. Let's kill him. And then the second one said, no, that's too much. If we tie him to a tree, by the time anybody finds him, we'll be long gone. So they decided to tie him to the tree. Then the third one, after a while, said, the poor man, he didn't do anything wrong. Let me go back and untie him. So he goes back and he unties him. And then the man says, oh, please come with, and he takes him and he says, this is your village. I'll take you out to the edge of the forest and point you in the direction so you can go home. So the man says, oh, you've been so kind to me. You please come with me and everyone will be so happy. I'll tell them how you helped me. And he said, no, I'm also one of the thieves. So this is how Thakur explains these three gunas. And there's the one that tries to kill us. This will be really the tamas of anger and hatred. And this anger in the form of temper, when we lose our temper, we lose everything. We lose all our discrimination, everything is gone. Hatred is not so intense, but it can last longer. And these to me are the worst types of things. This a common desire, we'll all have some desire. We have to deal with these things and live with it. But we really have to avoid this tendency to the anger and hatred and hostility and enmity and all of these things. These are really the destructive things that blacken the heart. Not just make it impure, but blacken the heart. So this idea of desire, that these things lead to a type of bondage and frustration and all identification with the lower self, because if we analyze everything, it all goes back to this body idea and this ego idea, these two types of identification. So these are the things that we have to work out a little bit. And as I said before, this anger, I think, is the most toxic, that we lose all sense of discrimination, we lose all sense of self-dignity and self-worth. So from a psychological point of view, even physiological point of view, there's anger, all sorts of hormones and chemicals, things are being produced in the body. It's really a very destructive type of thing. How do we get rid of these things? This is always an issue and a question. One way that I think is very helpful is to understand all of these passions and everything as simply vrittis of the mind. That I am not angry, this anger vritti is there, and I'm the observer of it. And I don't have to identify with it, I simply watch it, and I understand that this is a natural thing that took place because of my old samskaras. I don't like it, I want to try to change it, and we work on it. But most of the problem is that strong sense of identity comes. How dare you do that to me? Huh? How dare you do that? If we can look at it from this other point of view, yeah, you did something, it triggered some reaction because I'm used to reacting. That's the way my mind works, but I'm not really like that. Yeah, the mind got angry, I didn't get angry. There's one way of trying to do this, take care of this. But there are all sorts of ways that we try to cleanse the mind of the tendency to anger and hatred and jealousy and pride and all of these different things. So basically what we're really trying to do is develop sattvic qualities. We're trying to develop this kindness and goodness and compassion, all of the things we associate with sattva guna. I want to mention specifically 3 qualities that to me represent a pure heart. If we talk about people, pure-hearted souls, what does it mean to be a pure-hearted soul? First, I would say it's simplicity, innocence, or guilelessness. That we want to be simple like children. And the nice thing about children is they're not always obsessed with their own self-image. What will people think? What will people say? So the attitude of the child, they don't pay any attention to these things. That they don't care if somebody praises them or blames them or anything like that. And Thakur loved this. He used this term all of the time. saralata, this guilelessness of a child. And we find this in all religions. Unless we become like children, we can't enter into the kingdom of heaven. So this is a very important aspect of this purity of heart, that we try to have this innocence. And we see this in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, how innocent and simple he was. That even too simple. People would tell him something when he would have his illness or any type of problem. Anybody would come up with any quack remedy, he would try it. He gives us so many interesting examples. That one time, Hridoy, I think, one of them told him that it's good to get this cold, fresh air. So he was going in the carriage and he put his head out the whole time to catch that air, and he came down with the cold. And then another time, somebody saw him lying on the ground near a hole and said, "What are you doing there?" And he said, "Something bit me. I think it might have been a snake. And I heard that if a snake bites you a second time, that it takes out the poison that it gave you the first time. So I'm here waiting for that." And then they said, "But he has to bite you in exactly the same place." So then Sri said, "Oh, then maybe it wasn't a snake or something." And then but so simple, we find. So Thakur loved that. This is why he said that the Paramahamsa likes to keep a 5-year-old boy with him to aropkara, so that he can feel, he can take on that attitude. They can be like two children together. So this is number one, this simplicity. Second, this genuine feeling of love, oneness and sympathy with others. This is what we learn from Holy Mother. We see in her lifetime that she made no distinction between high or low, no caste distinction. We all know the story of Amjad. Amjad was one of the workers. They were part of this Muslim community that they were weavers. And the silk from the mulberry trees were all destroyed. The British they wanted everyone to buy cloth from England. So they were all left without any type of work. Many became these thieves. So he was like a dacoit. But he was very devoted to Holy Mother, and she loved him very much. So she would say, "You see this Amjad, he's equally my son as Sharad Maharaj, Swami Swahananda, who was such a pure, wonderful soul, so devoted to her, direct disciple." So she made no distinction between high and low, no feeling of separation or difference. So this will be the second thing, the type of purity that we want to attain. And the last is perfect selflessness, absence of ego. And this is one of the great teachings that we find in the life of Swami Vivekananda. We may want to say that his main teaching was strength, but equally important, I think, was this idea of becoming selfless. And he had a hatred of selfishness. He used to look upon that as one of the worst sins that we can have. Well, the greatest thing for him was self-sacrifice, to be able to offer ourselves in service to others, service to an ideal. He valued this idea of selflessness so much that he almost identified it with God himself. God himself is selflessness. He said the difference between God and the devil is in nothing except in unselfishness and selfishness. And then another place he said, unselfishness is God. One may live on a throne in a golden palace and be perfectly unselfish, and then he is God. Another may live in a hut and wear rags and have nothing in the world. Yet, if he is selfish, he is intensely merged in the world. So for Swamiji, this selflessness was identified with purity of mind itself. If we can become selfless, then we'll have that type of pure heart or pure mind. And for him, this practice of selflessness, this was the way to achieve this purity of heart. He said, gradually, by purity and unselfishness, we can make the obscuring medium, that means the mind, less and less dense, until at last it becomes as transparent as glass. And this is that purity of heart. It doesn't mean that we're brilliant people. It doesn't mean that there are no desires at all. Only we don't let them control it. this purity of heart and mind is what Christ says in the Beatitudes, is what allows us to have that vision of God and to make our lives blessed. So this is my prayer for all of us on this Christmas day, that we try to develop the innocence of a child, that broad and loving heart of the mother, and that perfect unselfishness, the unselfishness that we find in the great saints of the world, and we make our lives blessed, and by God's grace, one day we have that ultimate vision of God.